Thank you for joining the RTC Executive Advisory Committee. Chairwoman Rosenberg, staff is ready for you to begin the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning. Chairwoman Sandra Rosenberg for the record. I'd like to call to order the August 27th, 2020 meeting of the Executive Advisory Committee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of committee members, introduce staff on the line, and also touch on a few housekeeping items.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. David Gloria, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I'll be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Travis Anderson.
Present.
Mario Bermudez.
Present.
Dennis Cedarberg. Okay, I do see you have raised your hand in the WebEx feature. Thank you. Mike Jansen.
Present.
Keegan Luttrell.
Present.
Michael Mays.
Here.
Ed McGuire.
Here.
Johanna Murphy.
Present.
Chairwoman Sandra Rosenberg.
Here.
Richard Sechrist.
Present.
Robert Summerfield.
Here.
Michael Taffy.
I am here.
Okay, thank you. Please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. David Swallow, Deputy CEO, Mr. Craig Rayburn, Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Mr. David Clyde, Associate General Counsel, Mr. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering, Mr. Andrew Kelman, Manager of Transportation Planning, Ms. Beth Zhe, Manager of Transportation Planning, and Ms. Li-Han Su, Senior Transportation Planner. As the Chairwoman mentioned, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. When Chairwoman Rosenberg asks for comments from the committee or calls for a vote, please remember to unmute yourself before speaking. Remember to state your name for the record before providing comment. Be sure to mute your line if you are not speaking. Voting will be done verbally. The Chair will call for ayes and nays. If there are no nays, then the motion will carry. If there are nays, then a roll call vote will be required. In the event of a roll call vote, please wait for your name to be read to provide your vote. The Chair will call for any comments or questions after an item has been presented. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Gloria. Mr. Damiani, for the first item, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Rosenberg and members of the committee. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering for the record. The first item on the agenda is to conduct the first citizens participation period. On March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006 and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held telephonically. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnv.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Mr. David Gloria will read the public comments received by the RTC.
Thank you. This is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. David Gloria for the record. There are no public comments received at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, Mr. Damiani.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Item number 2 is to approve the agenda. The agenda is in order and ready for your approval.
Are there any comments or questions from the committee? If there are none, then do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Ed McGuire, motion to approve agenda.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Damiani.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman. Joe Damiani, RTC. Your next item is to approve the consent agenda. This consists of items 3 through 46 and can be taken in one motion.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee on the consent agenda? If there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Keegan Littrell, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Moving on, Mr. Damiani.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. That brings us to item number 47, which is to approve revisions to the RTC policies and procedures. This is our standing item that we bring forward once each year in August. If anyone has any revisions or updates to the policies and procedures, please provide them to the RTC staff, and we will bring them back next month for review and possible approval. No action is required at this time.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? And just to be clear, the staff isn't recommending any changes at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We will collect the changes and bring them back next month.
Okay, sounds good. If there are no questions or comments, we will move on to the next item. Mr. Rayborn.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Craig Rayborn, Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, for the record. The next item will be presented by Mr. Andrew Kelman.
Thank you, Craig. Andrew Kelman, Manager of Transportation Planning, for the record. This item is to approve Regional Transportation Plan Amendment Clark 21-00 to the 2017-2040 Regional Transportation Plan. Next slide, please. The current RTP was adopted in 2017, and federal regulations require it to be amended when there are major adjustments to existing projects. Next slide, please. So the primary purpose of this Regional Transportation Plan amendment is to move projects to the next fiscal year that were not initiated during federal fiscal year 2020. In addition to adjusting project implementation years, this amendment also removes projects from the Transportation Improvement Program, some of which have already been started in 2020. It also adjusts project funding as requested by the various project sponsors. This slide also highlights 4 Nevada DOT projects that are included in this overall amendment. So there are 3 projects here that will be added, and 1 project will be removed. Just to note that the removed roundabout project in Laughlin has been canceled by NDOT due to a reevaluation of the project scope of work. Next slide, please. This amendment also includes scope of work changes to a North Las Vegas project located at Cheyenne and MLK, and the City of Henderson modified the project limits of a bus turnout project on St. Rose Parkway. The City of Las Vegas is also removing a project on Rainbow Boulevard that was funded in part by federal congestion mitigation air quality funds. For public review of RTP Amendment 21-00, the RTC coordinated a 21-day publicly noticed comment period that ended on August 21st. No public comments were received during that time. For approval, after EAC consideration today, the RTC board will consider this amendment for approval at their September meeting. This amendment does not negatively impact air quality and is consistent with the goals and priorities of the RTP. RTC staff recommends approval of this amendment.
Are there any comments or questions from the committee? If there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion to approve the amendment?
Ed McGuire, motion to approve.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Rayborn.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The next item will be presented by Dr. Beth Zia.
Thank you, Craig. I see a Manager of Transportation Planning for the record. And this item is to receive a presentation and approve planning variables for the Regional Transportation Plan. RTC travel demand model is an essential tool to estimate future transportation conditions for the RTC Regional Transportation Plan development. The most important inputs to the RTC travel demand model a number of population, number of employment, number of dwelling units, and other social economic data for current and for future. So we call these input planning variables. Next slide, please. The planning variable development is a collective planning process of coordination and collaboration through land use working group activities. Land use working group consists of land use professionals and planners from City of Las Vegas, City of Henderson, City of North Las Vegas, Clark County School District, Airport, Nellis Air Force Base, Water District Authority, and RTC. So we have conducted 5 land use working group meetings since April 2nd, 2019. When necessary, RTC communicated with the entities by one-on-one meetings, emails, and conference calls. So we had discussions on data requirements, future projection measures, redevelopment topics, and future population and employment projections. RTC gave a presentation on final projected planning variables at the last land use working group meeting on July 9th, 2020, and got land use working group's consensus on the final planning variables. Next slide, please. The future year population projections start with base year conditions. Data source for base year population was from Clark County's Geographic Integrated Land Use Information System 2019 database provided by Clark County Department of Comprehensive Planning. Future year population were projected based on future projected land use and Clark County total population forecast by a Center for Business and Economic Research of UNLV. The future projected land use in parcel data was provided by each entity. This projected land use had been already included in their approved land use plan as of July 1st, 2019. Future developable land has 9 land use categories. Residential has 2 categories and non-residential has 3 categories. Next slide, please. The slide shows the acreage that would be developed by 2050. City of Henderson projected more residential developable land, and the City of North Las Vegas projected more vacant land for industrial development. Next slide, please. So this map shows the planned land use from 2020 to 2050. So it pictures where the new development would be. Most of the development will happen in the suburbs. The yellow represents single family. Dark red is for multifamily, and the orange is for industrial. Blue is for non-retail and all other industries. Next slide, please. The future population projection were calculated by using the available land use data, and then the calculated projections are adjusted by increasing the housing occupancy rates to match the CBER's population projections that are used as the control total. So these tables and charts show the results before and after the adjustment have been made. The red line is for CBER projection, and the green line is for RTC projection. We can see that these 2 lines are closer after adjustment, meaning that our projections are closely matched to the CBER's total projections. Next slide, please. The bar chart on this slide shows the projected dwelling units growth and projected population growth by entity. From 2019 to 2050, the projected population growth follow the same patterns of the dwelling units growth for each entity. Next slide, please. The slide presents the projected total dwelling units and the total population for each horizon year. In 2050, we would have 1.118 million dwelling units and 3 million people in the valley. Next slide. The lines on the slide show that the projected population by entity grow at the same trends as those for housing unit growth. Next slide. The base year employment data and the development of a future year projection are different from those for population and housing units projections. Data source for base year employment is from DETR 2019 second quarter data. The future employment growth projections were on the information of the existing industry distribution, and CBER's forecasted employment growth rates, projected land use, and some entity projected development for special generators or specific areas. Next slide. This slide shows the employment summary by industry category for the base year. The food and drinking services, hotel with gaming, private office, and retail industries have a larger employment shares of the region. Next slide. This table presents the employment projected by entity. In 2050, the total employment would be 1.36 million. Next slide. These two maps are the total population and the total employment growth from 2020 to 2050. Most of the population growth are located in the outskirts of Las Vegas Valley. Most of the employment growth are in Nellis Air Force Base and the Apex areas. Next slide, please. So the methodology and the procedures used in the development of the planning variables are documented and posted on the RTC's website. So this includes my report. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Beth. I actually have a couple questions, but I'm going to open it up to the committee first. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Okay, well, my main question is on the land use working group. Is there a conversation in that group about the region's ability to support this projected growth? I mean, I assume each entity is looking at that within their own master plans, but as a region, and we're looking at transportation, so I'm certainly concerned about that, but it's also, you know, water, schools, fire, like, is there a regional conversation about all of those support needs for this growth?
I think yes. So through our work with UNLV, we project with regional totals. So we heard that so some regional trends and regional inputs for the whole Clark County. And then we do our allocation based on our land use projections provided by the local entities, but we do match our projections with the CBER's control total. So when we consensus on the regional totals, so I think we considered that regional conditions. When we say regional, it's Clark County, yeah.
Yeah, and then sort of a follow-up to that, do we come back, so all this goes into the model for the RTP. Do we go back to that group and say, okay, here's based on our planned transportation projects and the projected inputs to the land use inputs, here are the areas where we're seeing potential issues in terms of travel reliability or congestion. Do we have that follow up in terms of here's what we're projecting? I mean, I know it's in the RTP, but before that all gets finalized into that document.
That part, so it's a good question. So far, we haven't done much in the interaction of transportation and the land use planning process there. So basically, it's still based on the local entities' land use projections. But when they do their land use projections, they sort of incorporated some of the regional transportation conditions. But there is no feedback loop of interaction to input the transportation condition back to the land use and then back to the transportation planning. Not yet.
Okay. Yeah, that's not surprising. That's sort of what I expected, but I hope that as a region, as the EAC, as the RTC, we work towards sort of that feedback loop. So that folks are aware, those of you who are doing the land use planning are aware of those impacts. And even though we can often, build the infrastructure needed, that might get tougher in the future. So making sure there's that kind of feedback in terms of the impact of these.
Yes, that is direction.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
RTC has.
That is the direction we are looking into it and we are working on it now.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I know RTC and we don't have jurisdiction over land use. I'm just hoping to see a more robust conversation and feedback on those decisions that affect each other. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
One more statement. So when we come up with Clark County regional control totals, so CBER used the REMI model. So that model used the state input and the national input as a background, and then Clark County in particular, some locally adjusted inputs into it. So when we get that regional control total, so sort of included into that model, and also transportation investment is a part of the input into that model too.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, do we have a motion to approve?
This is Mario Bermudez. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. We have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Rayborn.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Joe Damiani, for the record, RTC. The last item on your agenda, that's okay. The last item on the agenda is the final citizens participation.
Sorry about that, Mr. Damiani. This is the second time set aside for public comment. Just a reminder that comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. David Gloria again for the record. There are no public comments received at this time.
Okay, thank you. If there are no additional comments, I will close the item. Any parting words from the committee? All right, thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.